A new Newcastle. But for the occasional newspaper headline, many have no idea that the new way of life has bred a new way of violence at the bottom of the garden in our own backyard. Of course, a vast proportion of the young have benefited from the new social deal. But the numbers of teenagers involved in mob vandalism and street terrorism are by no means insignificant. Gangs of youth, some of them 100 strong, roam the city. To them, violence means survival, it's excitement, and it's become instinctive. Street battles flourish as the young people flock to one flag or the other, skinheads against Hairies, two distinct and bitterly opposed groups. Skinheads like the Scotswood Aggro Boys on the one hand, with their uniform styles of checked shirts, big polished boots, Crombie overcoats, and close-cropped hairstyles, grown slightly longer for the winter. Many proud of their headline reputation for violence, and anxious to exaggerate their toughness. They group on street corners. They're younger, many of them still at school, so they can't afford much in the way of social activities, but they do have their own type of music. It's an almost puritanical outlook. They've adopted the skinhead uniform, they say, because it's tidy, the hair short because it's clean, and they strongly disapprove of drugs, beads, and other hippie-style adornments. The Hairies, groups like the Throckley mob, are older and can afford to base themselves in a discotheque or take over a pub if it plays their kind of music. They have cars or motorbikes, see themselves as part of the new young elite, the generation which everyone is telling them has it made. Some of them admit to taking drugs. So the rivals exist side by side in Newcastle in dedicated opposition. But how extreme is their code of violence?
Put it this way, they would give us a really walking hour, hiding and all that, so it'd be the same to them.
You know, there's bottles, knives, you name it, they'll use them. The same with us, we'll use them on them as well. Once there's a fight, you know, it's a proper fight. Everything goes in it. And you don't count the odds when it's happening, you just get in and fight.
Well, if somebody dies, I think it's going to be a skinhead force because it's the Hairies who are carrying the guns.
You name it, everything happens. I'm not saying shotguns, but everything goes into it if there's a fight.
You don't arm yourselves at all then?
No, with guns anyway. Well, cushes now, where he crushed the black bone you don't eat there.
They pull flick knives shooting or meat cleavers and use out, you know, milk bottles, cushes, pump bottles, you name it, they use it like.
The lasses as well. Him, and they started with two skinny lasses they met one night, and they took this meat knife off them. What was it like? It was like that, it's a meat knife. The girls were carrying it. When it's a fight and our coppers come, all the weapons disappear, the girls walk away. The girls have got the weapons. That night, two girls, a meat knife like that. And this will be used in a fight. There's too much violence, there's no need for it.
Of course, when trouble does break out, it's the police who've got to deal with it. So they, more than anyone, know just how extensive the violence actually is. The Assistant Chief Constable is Walter Bahari.
Well, the problem in Newcastle is the same as what's happening in most cities of that size throughout the country, that this wave of violence and hooliganism seems to be spreading, and we are finding that hooliganism is taking place in the main for no apparent reason. It seems to be a form of amusement or pleasure to the boys that are concerned in it.
Something goes wrong. Skinnies have done it. It's not the long-headed ones, it's those the skinnies. They run after you, man. They get the blame for everything.
The law hates them. They do. They hate the Hairies. They can't stand it. And they get all this spat on the telly about the skinheads. But really, all they're doing is clamping down on the Hairies. They don't care the monkeys about the skinheads because they know they're just kids.
Everybody's getting it with. Everybody. The chase while out with the tune, you can't get doing the tune for the newer, with those coppers being behind you.
Dr. Cohen's theory is that it's the design and drab uniformity of housing estates that are partly to blame, because they make little or no concession to the needs of young people. And in the older areas, it's more simply bad housing and sheer poverty. It's a theory that's borne out by the police.
We're getting at either end of the city where the large housing estates are housing the poorer type of family. We're getting widespread vandalism in the council properties, schools, flats and so on are being broken up. We're getting complaints from elderly people living in flats in council estates of terrorism, in the sense that many old people are afraid to come out at night. And indeed in some parts are afraid also to report these things, otherwise they get victimised by youthful gangs.
The Scotswood Aggro Boys were brought up in this run-down area of Tyneside. Many have seen their home, their entire street demolished, and they've been moved to the newer outlying estates. But they still feel that they belong to Scotswood and travel down there every night to meet up. And this identification with their area has led to the theory that the skinhead daubings are really territorial boundaries within which they rule supreme. Doesn't everyone, though, have the right to walk freely about the streets?
No, I haven't. It's the same when we gone up the west end of the city where Big Lamb rule and all that. You would see the same to us. We were walking through and they'd go hiding.
So you must go out of your area to have a battle?
We've got they'll not come down here. We haven't had a battle on one ground.
So you admit you go out looking for a battle?
Aye, well, this day.
Well, why do you do this?
Well, because we like fights.
It breeds of itself in that you might have a gang of skinheads who want to cause trouble somewhere and they pick on some other boys. They in turn form a gang and look after themselves. We get boys picked up for carrying offensive weapons. Their story, of course, always is that they carry these because they need them to protect themselves.
It's self-defense. I've got no conscience about self-defense. We aren't going to back down from them. We aren't going to say peace and all this. They've just cut us through it. The police don't help in any way, you know, so we've got to take it on ourselves.
Of course, much of their toughness is sheer fantasy. The Hairies also play out their fantasies on their bikes and find escapism in drag.
It's real class, sort of like having a few joints and just jumping on your bike, really blasting on, you know, your head's spinning and, you know, you're not sort of like stunning, you not like drinking, you know what you're doing all the time, it's really good feeling. Acid, you know, LSD, that's really class stuff, that, you know, the hallucinations you get, it's really spot on, you know, seven-headed snakes chasing you that works. Oh yeah, I feel great, really, like, you know, when you're doing about 100 men and all. And the fear, you know, when somebody pulls out in front of you, and you say, oh my God, I want to hit him. And the fear that gone through your back, you know, you get off shaking, really shaking, like. Pigs, I mean, the police, you know, they've got a grudge against everybody, don't they? They all hate everybody, they didn't like anybody that's not a policeman. And the way we drive, like, couldn't give a damn about them. As long as they didn't catch you, or you just look around and see there's no policeman there, and you just drive like hell. People think everyone's going down the street like that. I think they're a bit jealous because they haven't got bikes like this, like the way we have, you know. And we drive, you know, crazy. And I like people to look around at me and say, my God, look at him, he's crazy. I like people to say that, you know, I like to see the expressions on their faces. They really are jealous, you know, because we haven't been bikes there.
But for the skinheads, it's the match, the Saturday afternoon game at St James Park, or a trip to see Newcastle play away, if they can find a coach operator who will take them. Skinhead violence and football have tended to become synonymous in recent seasons. The sports become an excuse for trouble, although Newcastle's police have succeeded with their special match tactics. Plenty of men, panda cars and dogs in evidence in the city to deter any would-be troublemakers. The high-rise flats look over St James Park, symbolising the sociologist's theory that housing plays its part in the problem. Up until now, the authorities' main contribution has been to build youth clubs, but several of these have been forced to close anyway because of the extent of the violence. And even in areas where the teenagers want them, are enough being built?
No, we definitely want a club built here. I tell you what, we're going to all the other clubs like West End, Newbig and all that. Anybody from Scotch is banned. From this area, they're bored. Nobody can get in. Except Million. And
the borders come there as well?
That's canny distance to go.
We're finding that very few parents are really concerned as to what their boys do. Some of them are concerned, some of them take steps to sort the matter out. But others, I'm afraid, do not cooperate with the police. If we approach them, they don't really care. And the basic thing is, I think that some of the parents don't even care what happens to their children anyway.
Geordie is one of the Scotswood boys who is lucky enough to have parents who do care. But do even his parents know just what happens, say, at a football match?
Oh, well, that fella, you know, just like that, I'm getting in trouble with the police, like, you know.
I wish they wouldn't go, because I dread it. Well, it's the innocent, it's them matches that gets hurt, I think. You know, when bottle throwing, and we had bad groups of skinheads, the pick fights with the guns, and some of these lads that are decent, they'll turn their back, but the bad ones will not, you know. Some of the parents must know what's happening. You know, the trouble they're making, and they're bound to come in some states, cut bruises and one thing and another. They just must know what's going on. And as I've often told George, his dad's told George, that if he brings any trouble here, if we see a police at our door, his dad threatens he'll storm off the 4 walls.
Well, I think myself, if violence was met with violence, that may be an answer, but yes, somehow or other. Something like, instead of a £15 fine, the boat, we'll take for example. If a young lad was going to, no, he's going to have those strokes off the boat, he might think twice of using violence himself.
The public generally tends to demand the type of action which, ironically, is often as violent an outlook as the skinheads' own. They call for the return of corporal punishment, the return of national service.
The answer is the law is not strict enough. Like I said beforehand, the police, the village police itself, he was the man who was the law. And if you saw a police walking down the street and you was there, and you didn't break the law. But the simple reason was, he used to just say, hey lad, could I do that, you know, you'll get a good aim off me. And that frightened me more than what a £5 fine did, I tell you, because that police was a big man. And I hate to get the valor for him. I think myself now, if the police would just use a little bit more like a backhander, I think myself, if police gave him a backhander, I wouldn't dispute the police.
But when there's no one left to blame, it's the police they all fall back on. Even though they're undermanned, they've started to put policemen back on the beat, and more in evidence than the panda car flashing past every half hour or so. But even so, their job isn't easy.
Our hands are tied in many of these things because the weapons they carry are normally ordinary, everyday things. We've not had much in the way of organised weapons in the sense of firearms and so on. We do get knives, we get bicycle chains, knuckle dusters, hammers, any kind of thing which is an ordinary, everyday household thing which is carried.
Yeah, come around this corner, they jump with the van, and all you see is shotguns, bayonets and all sorts aimed at you.
Why do you carry sawn-off shotguns?
Oh, just to shoot off, like. No, I just to shoot off. See what kind of got picked up, you know.
That's about 5'10".
It's not even safe on public transport. British Rail have faced big repair bills, and they put policemen on some late-night trains because of the threat to passengers. Everyone likes to cherish the idea that he'd be able to put a stop to a situation like this. But Alan Steen found he could do nothing when faced with the mob. He pretended to read a book.
I always thought if something like this happened, I would in fact get up and sort them out in some way at least. But when it actually did happen, I couldn't do anything about it. I just sat there. Something that made me very ashamed of myself. I couldn't do anything about it.
We would like the public to be rather chary as to how they come into this, because very often this is precisely what the gang wants. They want trouble, they're set off to find trouble, and some member of the public who tries to stop them, of course, becomes involved in the trouble.
Hate lawmen. That's the main trouble in our lawmen. Hairies, second, Blackbones, we hate them. We hate the big lamp, hate writing, hate nearly all the crews, New Biggin, we hate New Biggin. And all hate us, you know what I mean?
But why? What have they done to you?
No, they've done out, but we've got a better name, you know what I mean? We're hard hours. We've got loads of little youngins following up, man, you know what I mean? There'll always be Skinheads doing here.
But this can't go on forever, can it? I mean, what's going to happen when you're 21, 22?
Well, it's youngins like this what have carried it on.
Skinheads will disappear. There are signs of that already. A new trend will replace it, and the gangs could continue under different names, but in the same areas. Biker, Wallsend, Ryton, Walker, Westerhope, Newbiggin Hall, Kenton, Benwell, and of course Scotswood. Or will the children somehow escape the apparent inevitability of it all?
If we could persuade the youngsters concerned that they're doing themselves an injury, in the sense that if they have convictions like this as they grow older, they're to be ostracized by society, because whether they like it or not, society is as it is, and whether they change it, it will still remain that somebody has got to be able to walk about the streets safely.
Newcastle's changed fundamentally, almost as much as Mike Neville's accent, since the film was first screened in the early 70s. But what about the young men who appeared in the film, happily boasting about their violent exploits right here on these very streets? Geordie Potter was the leader of the Scotswood Aggro Boys. Albert Cube Olsen was a loyal foot soldier. Now in their late 50s, they've settled down, had children, and hold down regular jobs with the council. But back in the day, they battled with rival gangs and were convicted on numerous occasions for violent crimes.
See, we're like dogs with mark with territory on them bus.
Oh, yeah, territory.
So you must go out of your area to have a battle. We've got they're not come in here, we have not a battle on ground.
And Geordie's brought along 4 generations of his family for the viewing.
I'm full of myself. Understand? I've filled it. There's like a lump in me watching that.
And as I've often told George, his dad's told George, that if he brings any trouble here, if we see a police at our door, his dad threatens he'll storm off the 4 walls.
How do you feel watching that?
I had no clue. I thought he was Mammy's boy.
Mammy's boy?
Mm-hmm, Mammy's boy.
Good lad.
I used to shield him right, left and centre, didn't I?
Right.
And what do you think when you see him like that?
Shocked, because obviously he's always been really soft with us.
Yeah?
Just wouldn't think it. And like me and Anna said before, she didn't know anything about it. Us as kids have never ever known anything about it. He's just been my dad.
The Skinheads were sworn enemies of a biker gang, or Hairies, known as the Throckley mob. Now, we couldn't get any of the Hairies to go on camera, and that might be in part because one of them is currently detained at Her Majesty's pleasure for major drug dealing.
So the rivals exist side by side in Newcastle in dedicated opposition. But how extreme is their code of violence?
Everything happens. I'm not saying shotguns, but everything goes into it. There's a fight.
You don't arm yourselves at all then?
No, with guns
Aye,
anyway.
with
Well, cushes now.
Pull flick knives out and or mid cleavers and use out, you know, milk bottles, cushes, pop bottles, you name it, they use it like.
I mean, there was times we used to couple them or whatever, we walking past, would pull them up the basement and pull up the traffic lights.
Why a skinhead? Why not a hairy?
I didn't like long hair. The clothes suited me better than wearing like the flares and, you know, long collared shirts, and so we went for the really smart look.
I'm proud of them.
Got cook you through. So what you've got here? You've got SAB.
Scotch with Aggro Boys.
What else have you got? I think
I've got my nickname Cube.
Cube.
Yeah, that's a B.
Yeah. Was that the nickname that you had back then?
Yes.
Did you did them?
Yes, I done them with a needle, thread, and a bit Indian ink.
I've never given myself a tattoo. You probably guessed. And here you have the boot.
Yes, Scotch with Skinheads.
Why a skinhead?
I think it was just the music type. I don't like rock music.
Of course, when trouble does break out, it's the police who've got to deal with it. So they, more than anyone, know just how extensive the violence actually is.
Fighting was just part of it, which has gone on since the year dot. So you just dealt with it as part as perhaps the expression being the meat and potatoes of the job. You'd be standing outside the Strawberry or Gallagher or whatever it was, just waiting for trouble to come. And I think it was described to me as you knew what was coming, and you had to deal with it, and your stomach was turning over like nutty porridge.
How bad was it?
It's bad. There used to be some naughty things going on, and some naughty battles, and there used to be one time you would be fighting Newbiggin Hall lot or Big Lamp lot, and then if there was anybody else to fight, we'd just start fighting each other. And that was at the ground in the old Lees's end.
See, with 50 in the bus, got to a football match, all skinheads, all that was a brush. Nobody would run. There's many times I'd have scars on my chin, my heat and everything.
I mean, I can't think, coming home with a big hole in my head would be enjoyable.
It was something to show off though the next day.
Is that what it was?
You had your scars and you had your, and you battled hardened, as I say, sort of thing.
I must be honest, if you've had a fight yourself, you sometimes come away from it feeling quite good. Maybe the adrenaline rush you get, you know. But violence isn't funny, is it? It's ugly.
To be honest, I've never understood the urge to go out and have a fight as part of your evening's entertainment. But street violence has always provoked a very strong reaction.
Well, I think myself, if violence was met with violence, that may be an answer, but there's somehow or other. Something like, instead of a £15 fine, the boat, we'll take for example. If a young lad was going to get a half dozen strokes off the boat, he might think twice of using violence himself.
That was then, but what about now? Geordie's grandson Jack is the same age as he was in his hooligan days. So what if Jack got into bother now?
I wouldn't dare do stuff like that we've got to do back then. My mum would kill us.
What about the grandson then? If the grandson, you're sat there watching this, and the grandson's in the middle of it.
I'd kill him. I know what he's like. He wouldn't dare. He knows what I would say to him, do to him.
Oh. But if he was?
If he was...
I'd change the way you feel?
I'd try my best to get him out of it.
I honestly believe Geordie when he says he wouldn't want his grandson doing the things that he did. But neither him nor Albert seem particularly repentant about their violent past. But now they're older and theoretically wiser, surely, given that time again, they would do things differently.
I wouldn't change anything.
No?
No.
Not a thing?
Not a thing.